Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sovereign Spirits, where we explore methods on how to escape the reincarnation cycle, transcend the white light, and use our intention in a willful and powerful way to manifest an afterlife as sovereign spirits. I am here with co-creator and co-host of the show, Wayne Bush.
Oh, hi, Julie. Glad to be with you again. Looking forward to this episode.
Yes. Oh, I forgot to put my timer on. There we go. Don't want to go too far past. We'll try and keep track because you have a lot to share in this episode.
I do. In the first part, we went over some of the books that talked about in between lives, or the realm where spirits are hanging out before, in between their lifetimes. And we covered a few books, and mainly one of the big ones we covered was Dolores Cannon's book, Conversations with the Spirit Between Death and Life. And in this episode, we're going to be focusing primarily on Michael Newton's work and his two seminary works, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. So it's going to be some really good material in here that we need to, analyze. So
Yes, this is going to be really fun. I've been interested in this one. I love Dolores's stuff too, but I know this is really his work is very popular and well known.
yes,
So let's dig in. Let's
yeah,
go.
Journey of Souls was my favorite book for many a year, and I started going, I wonder about all this. So now I'm looking at it in a different light, but it's still a great book. And so just to give a background, Michael Newton in his book, he's a hypnotherapist, and he was taking his clients in between the lives, as we mentioned. And he writes, once in hypnosis, people report the pictures they see and dialogue they hear in their unconscious minds as literal observations. In response to questions, subjects cannot lie, but they may misinterpret something seen in their unconscious mind, just as we do in the conscious state. In hypnosis, people have trouble relating to anything they don't believe is the truth. Some critics of hypnosis believe a subject in trance will fabricate memories and bias their responses in order to adopt any theoretical framework suggested by the hypnotist. I find this generalization to be a false premise. So, he tries to address the fact that hypnosis is reliable. And he says in the early stages of hypnosis, regression into past lives, the descriptions of subjects mentally going through their past deaths do not contradict the reported statements of people who have actually died in this life for a few minutes. The difference between these two groups of people is that subjects in hypnosis are not remembering their experiences of temporary death. People in a deep trance state are capable of describing what life is like after permanent physical death. And so they talk about the tunnel effect that they experience when leaving Earth. And it's just this portal into the spirit world. And although souls leave their bodies swiftly, he says, it seems to me entry into the spirit world is a carefully measured process. Later, when we return to Earth in another life, the route back is described as being more rapid. The location of the tunnel in relation to Earth has some variations between the accounts of my subjects. Some newly dead people see it opening up next to them right over their bodies, while others say they will move high above the earth before they enter the tunnel. And one subject said, it's a hollow, dim vent, and there's a small circle of light at the other end. Newton says, okay, what happens to you next? I feel a tugging, a gentle pulling. I think I'm supposed to drift through this tunnel, and I do. It is more gray than dark now because the bright circle is expanding in front of me. And he says, it's as if I'm being summoned forward. Dr. Newton says, let the circle of light expand in front of you at the end of the tunnel. Continue to explain what is happening to you. The subject says, the circle of light grows very wide and I'm out of the tunnel. There is a cloudy brightness, a light fog. I'm filtering through it. So he says he feels the power of thought all around. And he says, I feel thoughts of love, companionship, empathy, and it's all combined with anticipation as if others are waiting for me. And then Dr. Newton says, as you move further away from the tunnel, describe what you see around you as much as possible. And he says, things are layered, sort of like a cake. And he sees layers, levels of light. They appear to be translucent, indented. He says, do you see the spirit world here is made up of a solid structure? That's what I'm trying to explain. It's not solid, although you might think so at first. It's layered. The levels of light are all woven together, stratified threads. He says, I didn't say the layers had any major color tones. They are all variations of white. It is lighter, brighter where I'm going than where I've been. Around me now is a hazy whiteness, which was much brighter than the tunnel. He says, is your soul moving up or down? He says, neither. I'm moving across. So that's just kind of interesting the way he describes that. And another subject was saying, good, I see my guide coming towards me. She knows what I need. Dr. Newton says, tell me what transpires between you and your guide. You know, he's not really leading them. He's just kind of following the flow.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the subject says, I say to her, I can't go on, that I need to know Maggie and the children are going to be okay. And how does your guide respond? She has comforted me, but I'm too loaded down. What do you say to her? I tell her, why did you allow this to happen? How could you do this to me? You made me go through such pain and hardship with Maggie, and now you cut off our life together. What does your guide do? She's trying to soothe me, telling me I did a good job and that I will see my life ran its intended course. Do you accept what she says? And the subject pauses and says, in my mind, information comes to me of the future on earth, that the family is getting on without me, accepting that I am gone. They are going to make it, and we will all see each other again. And how does this make you feel? I feel peace. He sighs and says, I'm ready to go on now. So this subject was upset with the guide, I guess, at first when they died, but then they were comforted and appeased by the guide in order to accept their death, you know. Kind of
Well, he
interesting.
blames it on the blame is on the guide for cutting short the life, it sounds like. So
It
that's
seems like that subject was not very happy with what happened. Like it seemed like it was, I don't know, misrepresented what was going to happen, or that the guide didn't choose it right or something. I don't know. And then so Newton writes about this homecoming, and he says, is anyone here to meet you? I thought I was alone, but in the distance, light moving fast towards me. Oh my gosh, what is it? Uncle Charlie, I'm over here. Why does this particular person come to meet you? Uncle Charlie, I've missed you so much. And Dr. Newton repeats his question. Because of all my relatives, I loved him more than anybody. He died when I was a child, and I never got over it. Well, how do you know it's Uncle Charlie? Does he have features you recognize? Sure, just as I remember him. Jolly, kind, lovable. He is next to me. He chuckles. And what is so funny? Uncle Charlie is just as fat as he used to be. And what does he do next? He is smiling and holding out his hand to me. Does this mean he has a body of some sort with hands? Well, yes and no. I'm floating around and so is he. It's in my mind. He's showing all of himself to me. And what I'm most aware of is his hand stretched out to me. Why is he holding out his hand to you in a materialized way? To comfort me, to lead me further into the light. And what do? I'm going with him, and we are thinking about the good times we spent together playing in the hay on the farm. And Dr. Newton says, and he is letting you see all this in your mind so you will know who he is. Yes, as I knew him in my last life, so I won't be afraid. He knows I am still a little shocked over my death. Dr. Newton says, then, right after death, no matter how many deaths we may have experienced in other lives, it is possible to be a little fearful until we get used to the spirit world again. He says, it's not really fear, that's wrong, more like I'm apprehensive maybe. It varies for me each time. The car crash caught me unprepared, and I'm still a little mixed up. All right, let's go forward a bit more. What is Uncle Charlie doing now? He's taking me to the place I should go. Dr. Newton says, on the count of 3, let's go there. 1, 2, 3, tell me what's happening. There are other people around, and they look friendly as I approach. They seem to want me to join them. Continue to move towards them. Do you get the impression they might be waiting for you? Yes, in fact, I realize I have been with them before. No, don't go. What's happening now? Uncle Charlie is leaving me. Why is he going away? Dr. Newton says, look deeply within your inner mind. You must realize why Uncle Charlie is leaving you at this point. Yes, he stays in a different place than I do. He just came to meet me, to bring me here. Oh, I think I understand. Uncle Charlie's job was to be the first person to meet you after your death and see you're okay. I'd like to know if you feel better now and more at home. Yes, I do. That's why Uncle Charlie has left me with the others. So here's a soul that's greeted by their Uncle Charlie and brought there to that place, but then their dead relative like just leaves them, right? His whole
Yeah,
goal was to
that's,
like make them feel comfortable
we
and
don't
take them
stay
where they,
there. Yeah, that's strange.
yeah. So
He
Dr.
lives in a different realm or something.
Different place, yeah. Maybe he's not in the
I
same.
wonder if it was even an Uncle Charlie.
Right. Yeah, you don't know. That's one of the questions that he asks. Kind of like right here. He says, Dr. Newton says, please tell me if I understand all this correctly. The identity souls project to each other depends on timing and location in the spirit world, as well as mood and maybe psychological states of mind when they meet. Sure, and it works both ways. It's interconnecting. Dr. Newton says, then how can we know the true character of a soul's consciousness with all these changes in each other's image? And the
Hmm.
subject laughs and said, the image you project never hides who you really are from the rest of us.
Huh.
So that was the answer. Although we've seen near-death experiencers where like a virgin, somebody entity appeared as the Virgin Mary when it wasn't really the Virgin Mary. So I don't know. There's
Hmm.
just conflicting reports to a certain,
Yeah, I've heard many accounts where they can manifest
right.
whatever they
Take,
want.
take whatever shape. Yeah. So Dr. Newton's, what happens to you at the moment of death? I feel a great sense of relief and I move out fast. How would you characterize your departure from Earth into the spirit world? I shoot up like a column of light and I'm on my way. He's like, I know the way. I don't need to see anybody. I'm in a hurry. And it doesn't bother you that you're not met by anyone? Well, there was a time when it was good, but I don't require that sort of thing anymore. He says, I don't need my hand held anymore. I know where I'm going and I'm anxious to get there. I'm being pulled along by a magnet and I just enjoy the ride. Explain to me how this pulling process works, which will take you to your destination. I am riding on a wave, a beam of light. Is this beam electromagnetic or what? Well, it's similar to the bands of a radio with someone turning the dial and finding the right frequency for me. Are you saying you're being guided by an invisible force without much voluntary control and that you can't speed things up as you did right after death? Yes, I must go with the wave bands of light. The waves have direction and I'm flowing with it. It's easy. They do it all for you. Who does it for you? The ones in control. I don't really know. Then you are not in control. You don't have the responsibility of finding your own destination. The subject pauses and says, my mind is in tune with the movement. I flow with the resonance. Dr. Newton asks, resonance? You hear sounds? Yes, the wave beam vibrates. I'm locked into this too. And Dr. Newton says, let's go back to your statement about the radio. Is your spiritual travel influenced by vibrational frequencies such as high, medium, and low resonance quality? That's not bad, yes, and I'm on a line, like a homing beacon of sound and light, and it's part of my own tonal pattern, my frequency. I'm not sure I understand how light and vibration combine to set up directional bands. Think of a monster tuning fork inside a flashing strobe light. Oh, then there is energy here? We have energy within an energy field, so isn't just the lines we travel on. We generate energy ourselves. We can use these forces depending on our experience. Then your maturity level does give you some element of control in the rate and direction of travel. Yes, but not right here. Later, when I'm settled in, I can move around much more on my own. Now I'm being pulled and I'm supposed to go with it. Okay, stay with this and describe to me what happens next. I'm moving alone, being homed into my proper space, going where I belong. So it's
Hmm.
kind of a contradiction with the one subject in Dolores Cannon's book that said you're always met by someone. And
Yeah.
also interesting, they're saying they're being guided by an invisible force without much voluntary control, and the ones in control do it all for you. So I mean, that's why I think we need to be more proactive at first. And I mean, once you've
Yeah.
entered into their domain by like going through the tunnel and into the light, it sounds like at some point it's like things are almost beyond your control, or you're kind of
Hmm.
less sovereignty over it at that point. I don't know.
Right. Which is why we keep saying when we cross over, we want to immediately put up protections and,
Mhm.
maybe enter our own black void, and just remember our first memories of why we came here and start taking control immediately.
Right, right. So he talks about an orientation period, and there's this shower of healing. And he says, I'm propelled in, and I see a bright, warm beam. It reaches out to me as a stream of liquid energy. There is a vapor like steam swirling around me at first, then gently touching my soul as if it were alive. Then it is absorbed into me as fire, and I am bathed and cleansed from my hurts. Dr. Newton says, is someone bathing you, or is this light beam enveloping you from out of nowhere? I am alone, but it is directed. My essence is being bathed, restoring me after my exposure to Earth. I have heard this place is similar to taking a refreshing shower after a hard day's work, Dr. Newton says. I think Dolores Cannon in her work was mentioning some kind of shower or some kind of healing place too. Dr. Newton says, this place I've come to call the shower of healing is only a prelude for the rehabilitation of returning souls. The orientation stage, which immediately follows, especially with younger souls, involves a substantial counseling session with one's guide. The newly refreshed soul arrives at the station to undergo a debriefing of the life just ended. Orientation is also designed as an intake interview to provide further emotional release and readjustment back into the spirit world. People in hypnosis who discuss the type of counseling which goes on during an orientation say their guides are gentle but probing. Nothing can be hidden by students from their spiritual teachers. No subterfuge or deception exists in a telepathic world. Dr. Newton, which I don't know about that, but according to this subject right now.
We've heard otherwise, so.
Right. Dr. Newton says, you sound a little depressed at the prospect of an intimate conversation with your guide about your last life. The subject gets defensive and says, because I blew it. I have to see him to explain why things didn't work out. Life is so hard. I try to do it right, but do what right? With the anguish, he says, I had an agreement with Clodes to work on setting goals and then following through. He had expectations for me as Ross. Damn, now I have to face him with this. Dr. Newton says, you don't feel you met the contract you had with your advisor about lessons to be learned as Ross? Impatiently, no, I was terrible. And of course, I'll have to do it all over again. We never seem to get it perfect. You know, if it weren't for Earth's beauty, the birds, flowers, trees, I would never go back. It's too much trouble. So that's very insightful. That he's like, he just seems like, we always seem to go back. We never seem to get it right. You know, I mean, that's a little suspicious, no? I mean, I don't know. It's gonna be so hard. I don't know.
Very suspicious.
Yeah, and so it's like, you know, you could have done better. You know, it's the guide was like telling him that, and you were corrupted by the system. Explain this to me. And so he's like trying to defend why he did his actions on Earth, and he says, he was like a lawyer, and he said, well, what do you feel responsible for prosecuting criminals who are guilty of hurting others? And said, few of those, most were just ordinary people like my parents who got caught up in the system needing money to survive. And there were those who were sick in the head. What about the victims of the people you prosecuted? Didn't you choose a life of law to help society and make the farms and the towns safer with justice? What more would you have me do? You didn't reach far enough inside yourself. I placed thoughts in your mind of temperance, moderation, responsibility, original goals, your parents' love. You ignored these thoughts and were stubborn to alternative action. And he replies, I know I missed the signs you set up. I wasted opportunities. I was afraid. So yeah, even though they're like trying to whisper in, it's like life is so hard and it's very difficult to I guess hear them and act differently. So the subject says, when we choose a body and make a plan before coming back to Earth, there is an agreement with our advisors. An agreement about what? We agree not to remember other lives. Why? Learning from a blank state is better than knowing in advance what could happen to you because of what you did before. But wouldn't knowing about your past life's mistakes be valuable in avoiding the same pitfalls in this life? If people knew all about their past, many might pay too much attention to it rather than trying out new approaches to the same problem. The new life must be taken seriously. Are there any other reasons? Without having old memories, our advisors say there is less preoccupation for trying to avenge the past, to get even for the wrong that's done to you. Well, it seems to me that so far this has been part of the motivation and conduct in your life as Hester. And do you still think a total blackout of our eternal spiritual life on Earth is essential to progress? Normally, yes, but it's not a total blackout. We get flashes from dreams during times of crisis. People have an inner knowing of what direction to take when it is necessary. And sometimes your friends can fudge a little. By friends, you mean entities from the spirit world. They give you hints by flashing ideas. It says, our eternal identity never leaves us alone in the bodies we choose, despite our current status. In reflection, meditation, or prayer, the memories of who we really are do filter down to us in selective thought each day. Still talking about the
memories and these flashes are to help us.
Right.
So memories do help us.
Oh, the
But yeah,
entity, is that what you're saying? They
well,
do
I'm
try to
just
help.
saying that first they say, no, memories, you can't have those because you need to think of new ways to figure out your
Right.
problems. And then on the other hand, we'll give you memories because those will be helpful. Once in a while, we'll give you flashes of memories so are they helpful or not?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good
I just
question.
know that I don't know if you first time you ever touch a hot stove, if you do it again, I mean, if you have the memory that's there
Hmm.
that you touched it and it was hot, then you don't do it again. But if you don't have that memory, then you're just going to do it again. So
Right.
memories are probably good for lessons, for learning. I don't buy into this. Oh no, you can't have those memories because
Right. And if if they're so worried about us avenging other lives and stuff like that, then my God, we're not making any progress whatsoever down here. If that's going to be such an issue, revenge. Come on.
right,
Um,
exactly.
So Dr. Newton says both positive and negative emotions are mixed between soul and host for their mutual benefit. If a soul only knew love and peace, it would gain no insight and never truly appreciate the value of these positive feelings. The test of reincarnation for a soul coming to earth is the conquering of fear in a human body. A soul grows by trying to overcome all negative emotions connected to fear through perseverance in many lifetimes, often returning to the spirit world bruised or hurt, as case 13 indicated. Some of this negativity can be retained even in the spirit world and may reappear in another life with a new body. On the other hand, there's a trade-off. It's in joy and unabashed pleasure that the true nature of an individual soul is revealed on earth in the face of a happy human being. Orientation conferences with our guides allowed us to begin the long process of self-evaluation between lives. Soon we will have another conference, this time with more master beings in attendance. So the book says, like, the test of reincarnation for soul coming to earth is the conquering of fear in a human body. Soul grows by trying to overcome all negative emotions connected to fear through perseverance in many lifetimes. I mean, why is fear such a huge thing that we need to use to grow and conquer this fear? I mean, if you didn't
In a
come down here in
human
the first
body.
place, you wouldn't have the fear at all, right? It comes.
Right. Yeah, I thought that we were over there and you don't have this, you don't have the fear. Why would you have to conquer it? Over there, you don't have to conquer it, but
Right.
you come here to conquer it and then you go back there and you're still at a place where you don't have to conquer it. So that doesn't make
Kind of sounds
sense.
illogical a little bit.
It's illogical.
So they talk about the transition in the book, and Dr. Newton says, my subjects report that the initial orientation session with their guides prepares them to go before a panel of superior beings. However, the words courtroom and trial are not used to describe these proceedings. A number of my cases have called these wise beings directors and even judges, but most refer to them as a council of masters or elders. This board of review is generally composed of between 3 and 7 members, and since souls appear before them after arriving at their home base, I will go into this conference in more detail at the end of the next chapter. All soul evaluation conferences, be they with our guides, peers, or a panel of masters, have one thing in common. The feedback and past life analyses we receive in terms of judgment is based upon the original intent of our choices as much as the actions of a lifetime. And he says, karmic payment will come in a future life. I've been told that our spiritual masters constantly remind us that because the human brain does not have an innate moral sense of ethics, conscience is the soul's responsibility. And then he says, this world is ageless and so too are our learning tasks. We will be given other chances in our struggle for growth. When the initial conference with our guide is over, we leave the place of orientation and join a coordinated flow of activity involving the transit of enormous numbers of other souls into a kind of central receiving station. And he says this is subject, one person called this area the Los Angeles Freeway without gridlock. So here they go before this panel of superior beings. They're calling them directors and judges or a council, but it's not supposed to be a judgment. It's like they're describing everything like a judgment in a council, but they're not really labeling it as such. And then,
Yeah.
of course, here the idea of karma is being promoted here. I don't know, just interesting. This
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I hear conflicting things because we're told we have a life review that we judge ourselves, so to speak, that we're our own judge.
right.
But then you hear about these guides and councils and they seem to be over us and judging us. So
Masters and guides and all
masters, they're
those
the
names and
master. You're the
terms imply that they know
hmm
better than we do or something, and that
hmm
they're guiding us, telling us how we should. And you got supercomputers over there that are going to calculate what you what your next life should be like. It's like, wait a minute. So other subjects who are also disposed towards linear description speak of traveling along directional force lines, which have the spatial properties of a grid system. One person called them vibrational strings. And Dr. Newton says, are asked, by less freedom, do you mean less personal control? Yes. And he said, what I'm trying to say is I'm being carried along as if I were in a current underwater. Why do you think this is so? Well, it's as if we are all swimming, being carried along in a swift current which we can't control, under somebody's direction, up and down from each other in space with nothing solid around us. Who is doing the pushing while you are being taken home? Higher entities, the ones in charge of our movements to get us home. Entities such as your guide, above him, I think. What else are you feeling at this moment? A peace. There was such peace you never want to leave again. And he's talking about moving like a long corridor, stretching out in the distance, and the lights are these people, the souls of people within the bulging galleries reflecting light outward to me, patches of light bobbing around. And are these clusters of people structurally separated from each other in the bulges along the corridor? No, there are no walls here. Nothing is structural with angles and corners. It's hard for me to explain. He says the people are divided by thin, wispy filaments, making the light milky like the transparency of frosted glass. There is an incandescent glow from the energy as I pass by. How do you see individual souls within the clusters? As light dots, I see masses of dots hanging in clumps as hanging grapes, all lit up. And he says, give me an example, or ask, give me an example of what the whole thing looks like to you from a distance. And the subject laughs and says, a long glowworm, its sides bulging in and out, the movement is rhythmic. And he says, swaying as if a ribbon in the breeze while I am going further away. And he says, after a while, I see nests of people. You mean groups of people? Yes, like hives. I see them as bunches of moving lights, fireflies. Have you reached your own hive or cluster group? Now that you're stationary, what are your impressions? It's large. Activity. There are a lot of people in the vicinity. Some are familiar to me, others are not. And he's saying that you're not supposed to go off. You can't just go off anywhere. You have to stay within your group. And he's saying you're saying to me your soul energy cannot arbitrarily float anywhere, such as outside your group. They are not in my group over there. So it says that is this is our place. We are here. That's their place, and so they're not supposed to go over there. And so
Wow.
he says there are great expanses of space and such a sense of freedom here, as long as we pay attention to the rules. And he says the teachers help us, otherwise we would be lost. And
Hmm.
he says after souls arrive back to their soul groups, they're summoned to appear before a council of elders. While the council is not prosecutorial, they do engage in direct examination of a soul's activities before returning them to their groups. It's not unusual for my subjects to have some difficulty providing me with full details of what transpires at these hearings, and I am sure these blocks are intentional. So he's using these terms by the clients and Dr. Newton. They're like referring to them as entities, hives, clumps, pods, grapes, like glowworm. And Dr. Newton here is saying he's
Wow.
getting blocked from getting certain information. Like the client
Uh-huh.
can't get that information, it's blocked. And that's a little peculiar too.
Yeah, these descriptions sound, I don't know, ET-ish to me.
Yeah, and just
They
blocks. I mean,
don't
like
sound spiritual. I don't know. That's just maybe my thinking.
secrecy is just kind of a red flag to
A red
me.
flag. Oh, yeah.
Like, oh no, we can't tell you that. You're not allowed to know that, right? This says group placement is determined by soul level. After physical death, a soul's journey back home ends with debarkation into the space reserved for their own colony. So they're talking about being part of a soul cluster group, a small primary unit of entities who have direct and frequent contact, just as we would see in the human family.
hmm
Within these ponds, he says, I've never heard of a secondary group estimated at less than 1,000 souls. The many primary group clusters which make up one secondary group seem to have sporadic relationships or no content at all between clusters. It's rare for me to find souls involved with each other in a meaningful way who are members of two different secondary groups. But the smaller subgroup primary clusters vary in number, containing anywhere from 3 to 25 souls. I'm told the average assemblage is around 15, which is called the inner circle. Any working contact between members of different cluster groups is governed by the lessons to be learned during an incarnation. So then they have these Greek temples of study where they're like in some kind of, you leave the staging area and you arrive in this like spiritual place where you belong. And he says they're like in some kind of school with their friends, like some kind of spiritual classroom where they study. And he says we all help one another go over our mistakes during this cycle. Our teacher is in and out, so we do a lot of studying together and discuss the value of our choices. So I mean, we're supposed to have this free will, and we come down to earth. I mean, can you think of anything less fun than going back and just going over maybe not every part of your life, but just going over your life, and they're just like and they're like pointing out all the mistakes you made, and boy, you sure could have done this better. Oh man, it just does not sound very fun at all.
No,
Right.
it doesn't. It's, yeah. And again, there's so many conflicting stories here about what one experiences. But yeah, it sounds like this whole hierarchical, like school system, government, legal, it sounds not that different from Earth in a way. The
Yeah, I
control.
never liked having to go to school, to be quite honest with you, and I can't think of anything less. I don't know. The legal system, as you say, it's not fun.
Very
Um,
flawed.
Yeah,
Um,
Dr. Newton says, usually their old guides continue to monitor them through one master teacher. Thus, a new pod of entities graduating into full level 3 could be brought together from many clusters within one or more secondary groups. So they're using the word pods, just like the movie The Matrix. And this material came out before The Matrix. And they're talking about pods and clusters and hives. And so he goes on, there's a section about guides. He says, I've never worked a subject in trance who did not have a personal guide. Much depends on the types of souls in a section and the experience of their leaders. In the larger sections, they have help too, you know. Who does? The guides you are calling seniors. Well, who helps them? The overseers. Now, they are the real pros. I have heard of them also called master teachers. So they're these masters and, you know, overseers. And we're going to hit another term later on that, oh shoot, what was it? I can't even remember, but we'll come upon it. But I don't like these terms either, to be quite honest. Entities. I mean, we all know they have been through a lot themselves. I'm not sure about that. And so they say that they're very loyal to their guides. And so Dr. Newton says, so we don't get to choose our guides? And the subject says, no way, they choose you. Now, didn't Dolores Cannon's book, I thought they were saying that the client was able, that they had some say in who they're, I don't
yeah,
know
I thought so too.
about that.
Mhm.
So Dr. Newton says, I believe a guide's motivation for blocking information goes far beyond resisting the immediate psychological direction a therapy session is taking. He says, I'm only able to collect these spiritual secrets and fragments from a large body of client information reflecting the discretion of many guides. So it sounds like he gets, you know, like there are many oftentimes they're just not telling him certain information. He has to piecemeal it all together from all his different subjects because they're like, nope, that's like classified information only. Oh my God. Shouldn't laugh. It's really sickening, to be quite honest. So it says people in hypnosis say they feel the presence of a supreme power directing the spirit world, but they are uncomfortable using the word God to describe a creator. And then there's a section on the beginner soul, where, you know, where it's in near-death experiences, they have no problem whatsoever describing that white light as God or source. I mean, there so many of them are just, oh yeah, that white light, it's God. But here, it sounds like they're uncomfortable using the word God, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe they have a little more, they're a little deeper in or something. The beginner soul. And Dr. Newton says, I have had many cases where a client has been incarnating for up to 30,000 years on Earth and is still in the lower levels of 1 and 2. The reverse is also true with a few people, although rapid acceleration in spiritual development is uncommon. As with any educational model, students find certain lessons more difficult than others. One of my clients has not been able to conquer envy for 850 years in numerous lives, but she did not have too much trouble overcoming bigotry by the end of the same period. Another has spent nearly 1,700 years off and on seeking some sort of authoritative power over others, however he has gained compassion. Really, it takes 850 years. I mean, some clients have been incarnating for up to 30,000 years and they're still in these lower levels of 1 and 2. That does not sound like a very good system for learning. It just doesn't.
That is not a very good system. No. Yeah.
And if it's not a system designed for learning, then what is it designed for?
That is the $1,000,000 question.
Right. So they're talking about now that you have died and returned to the spirit world, tell me what you feel. Cheated. That life was so cruel. I couldn't stay. I was only a little girl unable to help anybody. What a mistake. Who made this mistake? In a conspiratorial tone. My leader. I trusted his judgment, but he was wrong to send me into that cruel life to be killed before my life got started. But did you agree to come into the body of Chavez? Upset. I didn't know Earth would be such an awful place full of terror. I wasn't given all the facts. The whole stupid life was a mistake, and my leader is responsible.
Mm.
Isn't that interesting? Even
Very.
they are very conspiratorial and upset about some of that. So, yeah, they trusted their guide's judgment, but saying that they were wrong to send them into that cruel life and that they weren't given all the facts. So,
That's very important.
yeah, I mean, these are the books. Dr. Newton's Journey of Souls and Dolores Cannon. These are the books about between lives. They're well read by everyone and very well respected, I would think. And these are what they're saying. And it's not something we're making up. Like, oh, somebody emailed me this, and remember, this is what they told me. This is not my own work. This is, then he talks about the creation of souls. He goes, I have learned there seems to be a kind of spirit world maternity ward for newborn souls. One client told me this place is where infantile light is arranged in a honeycomb fashion as unhatched eggs ready to be used. And we'll get more into this creation of souls later on. But Dr. Newton asked this one subject is, what happens next? My old friends are around me and we're talking about the foolishness of life. We rib each other about how dramatic it all is down there on Earth and how seriously we all take our lives. You and your friends don't think it's important to take life on Earth seriously? He says, look, Earth is one big stage play. We all know that. And your group is united in this feeling? Sure, we see ourselves as actors in a gigantic stage production. Dr. Newton asks, well, how many entities are in your particular cluster group in the spirit world? Well, we work with some others, but there are 5 of us who are close. So there they are talking almost as like it's entertainment, like it's a big stage play and they're actors in this big production. But it's not very common. I haven't come across it very often. And then there's this cone of harmony that they talk about, and they're put under, it's very bright and it's cylindrical and it's put around all of them, and it allows them to really concentrate on their mental sameness as a group. It sounds like, hive mind kind of thing, and they're just and so he goes, what do you feel when you're under the cone? We can feel all our thoughts being expanded, then drawn up and returned back with more knowledge added. And Dr. Newton says, I wonder if this cone is brainwashing your original thoughts. After all, the arguments and disagreements between you and the others of your group are what make you individuals. And the subject laughs and says, we aren't brainwashed. Don't you know anything about the afterlife? It gives us more collective insight to work together. So, even here, Dr. Newton himself is wondering if the souls are being brainwashed.
Right.
It really makes you wonder. Once again, I like Dr. Newton and his research. This was my favorite book for many, many years. I'm not trying to say otherwise. I think he found some really important information, and maybe there's a way to look beyond what he took at face value. Maybe he wasn't allowed to write everything he wanted to write in the book either. Who knows? What they were allowed to publish, or maybe he just didn't want to go that far in the conspiratorial, But here he is asking those questions and insinuating that they're maybe being brainwashed.
Right.
So here they're talking about. He says his students are a colorful family of souls. There is much here that is typical of all cluster groups. A guide's leadership is more parental than dictatorial. This is what one of the subjects is saying. It's more parental than dictatorial. But they're even making that comparison at all. That it's not a dictator. It's more parental. But it's
Fine line there.
Yeah. Here's maybe one of the terms. Another subject identified themselves as watcher. He feels that they're term watchers better describes him and his group.
Oh, okay.
These tests give the watchers information about our imagination, creativity, and ingenuity. I can't say the word ingenuity, but and the watchers is like a term, isn't that kind of like from the
Uh-huh.
Bible? You know,
Uh-huh.
the,
Yeah, there are watchers
Solomons.
today that call themselves watchers in human form. I don't know,
Mhm.
some of these things sound like
Holy
they're
soul.
so non-human, like they're studying, observing human behavior and emotions for some reason.
Yeah, it sure does. And then so he talks about intermediate souls and soul splitting in parallel lives. And he says, I have a couple more questions on the mechanics of soul splitting. How do you see the manner in which you divide your soul energy into various parts? We
Mhm.
are as particles of energized units. We originated out of one unit. What was the original unit? The maker. He says, part of us never leaves since we do not totally separate from the maker.
Mm.
And says, what we must appreciate is if our souls are all part of one great oversoul energy force which divides our or extends itself to create our souls, then why shouldn't the offspring of this intelligent soul energy have the same capacity to detach and then recombine? So they're saying, like, if God or Creator split himself, then why shouldn't we, as products of that original Creator, be able to do the same? I guess is what he's
Sure.
saying. So they talk about this world without ego, and the subject says, yes, the newly created soul is there to learn who they are. It's the place of origin. Dr. Newton says, are the ego entities passed out at random, or is there a choice for beginner souls? The new soul is not capable of choice. You acquire your character based upon the way your energy is combined, put together for you. Is there some sort of spiritual inventory of characteristics that are assigned to souls? So much of one type, so much of another. And he says, in fact, many factors are considered. What I do know is once given, ego becomes a covenant between oneself and the givers. What does that mean? To do the best I can with who I am. So the purpose of this world is distribution of soul identity by advanced beings. Yes, the new soul is pure energy with no real self yet. The world without ego provides you with a signature. So now they're almost like saying they're just creating, like, we're blank
Wow.
souls, empty
Right.
slate, got no choice in any of this, and just given whatever this, is given to you from the givers.
Hmm.
um, yeah, it's kind of disconcerting.
Hmm.
Um, is Earth is considered severe? Yes, on some worlds you must overcome physical discomforts, even suffering. Others lean toward mental contests. Earth has both. We get kudos for doing well on the hard worlds. We are called the adventurous ones by those who don't travel much. And then there's a section on refurbished souls, which the subject does not like that term refurbished, but at some point, some need to be restored. Spirits need to be restored as if they were bad spirits. Oh, let's go back and restore them. We made a mistake in the production. The world of all know. Sorry about that. The world of all knowing. It is a place of contemplation, the ultimate mental world of planning and design. I can tell you a little bit about this sphere, except it is the final destination of all thought. The senses of all living things are coordinated here. It is a dimension where the realization of all our hopes and dreams is possible. I am given only bare references to this universal absolute because even my advanced subjects have no direct experience there. All souls are anxious to reach and be absorbed by this nucleus, especially as they draw closer and are enticed by what little they can see. Being absorbed, being enticed, yeah, it all sounds wonderful.
Oh,
Uh,
geez.
and then there's this world of altered time. It's like the sphere of Earth is only simulated for my use. It's for training purposes. And why do you call this third sphere the world of altered time? Because we can change time sequences to study specific events. To improve my decisions for life, this study makes me more discriminating and prepares me for the world of all knowing. And then they talk about this Earth 2, where we go there to create and just enjoy ourselves as free spirits, and the maker's energy joins the units of every living thing in existence. We copy things and compare them against the original so we can make larger models. And this all sounds like souls playing as children in a sandbox with toys. And the subject says, we are children. Directing an energy flow resembles the sculpturing of clay. If I am clumsy and do a bad job, I disassemble some creations. I undo my abominations. Is this what you mean by uncreation? You can destroy energy. Energy can't be destroyed. We reassembled it and start over using different combination. Um, And Dr. Newton, he's like, I am left with the impression the spirit world is one huge organizational pyramid with the supreme authority of power at the top. The subject says, sighs and says, no, you are wrong. It is not a pyramid. We are all threads in the same long piece of fabric. We are all woven into it. It's hard for me to visualize fabric when there are so many levels of competency for souls. And the subject says, think of it as a moving continuum rather than souls being in brackets of highs and lows. Dr. Newton says, I always think of souls moving up in their existence. You know, we're talking about ascension and 5D, all this stuff. This is me inserting it. And the subject says, I know you do, but consider us moving across. And then get to this section.
We hear that again. Another talk
the
about
tapestry that we're all woven into. And then they talk about advanced souls, which is, and they're blue. I think he's saying these souls are blue, like in level 5, he calls them blues. And I think like the beginner souls, if I'm not mistaken, or in the lower levels, they're white. So it makes you think of the white light, which is this collective of souls. It's this collective of maybe a bunch of low-level souls that have an advantage because it's all white. Either that or all the colors combine, like, you know, when you paint, you combine all the colors and it becomes a composite. It's white. But it's interesting that the advanced souls are more blue in color or something. So why isn't if this white light or whatever that we go to at death, if it's so much source or so advanced, so why isn't it a different color than, I don't know, just white?
True.
And then there's this, Dr. Newton's talking about myths of ghosts and stuff, but he says we communicate by absorbing the energy presence of each other, which is an interesting comment. Okay, here's a section on watchers, and supposedly Dr. Newton's talking to the subject, and the subject is talking about, I think his guide, his name is Kumara. And Kumara, I know a little, I've heard of this Sanat Kumara, ascended master or something, and I don't know, I don't want to get too deeply into that, but he says, how many souls are in your company? 9. He says, and yet you're the spiritual teacher for all 9? I prefer to call myself a watcher. 3 of my company are also watchers. Dr. Newton said, I would call Kumara a master teacher. I mean, and they're talking about these watchers. I mean, who are these clients he's talking to? Or is he even talking to the clients at all? And is there some entity that is intervening or
Talking to them.
Yeah, it just makes you wonder. He says, as watchers in the stillness, we recognize the amount of turbulence from the wake of troubled thought, and we carefully merge with it and gently touch the mind. And so they're saying these watchers merge with the thoughts and stuff. He says, how do you implant ideas? I'm unable to tell you. And the subject says, I suspect blocking here, or Newton, I think, says, I suspect blocking here, but I can't complain. Watchers are not supposed to intrude. It's more of a soft coupling. I implant ideas which they assume is inspiration to try and give them peace. And I think he's almost talking about watchers in this scenario as like their guides, or they're like trying to help humanity, you know? But then why would you interfere? Here's they're talking about making suns and stuff like that. And he says, then why would you interfere with what a sun would naturally do with its own energy on a planet? It's not interference. We examine new structures, mutations to watch and see what is workable. We arrange substances for the most effective use with different suns. And I don't know, it's just really, why is there energy striving to create universal matter and more complex life when Kumara and the entities above her are already proficient? We are expected to join them just as they wish to unite their accomplished energy with the old ones. Okay, and then it talks about other worlds, and the subject is saying the Earth school is insecure. It's filled with resentment of many people over being led and antagonism of the leaders toward each other. There is so much fear to overcome here. It is a world in conflict because there is too much diversity among too many people. Other worlds have low populations with more harmony. Earth's population has outpaced its mental development. And they're talking about to bring order out of disorder, which is another slogan that, what is that, order out of it's, I don't know, conspiracy type stuff. There are easier life forms who are less in conflict with themselves. And so, you know, they're mentioning there's other worlds or schools that are easier, which we've been saying all along. Why do we keep coming back If we got all of eternity, why are we picking such a hard lesson or hard place to come to? If you even do need to come, which they're saying you don't, right?
Right.
Even put all this cosmic pressure on you
Yeah,
to.
we're convinced, and their job is to persuade us and convince us and manipulate us, apparently, in a lot of these cases.
Right. And so here, I thought this part was interesting where the section is source as a dark, cold light. And the subject says, it's as if souls are all part of a massive electrical explosion which produces a halo effect. And this circular halo is a dark purple light which flares out lightning to a whiteness at the edges. Our awareness begins at the edges of brilliant light, and as we grow, we become more engulfed in the darker light. Dr. Newton says, I find it hard to visualize a God of creation as cold, dark light. That's because I am not close enough to conjunction to explain it well, the subject says. The dark light itself is a covering beyond which we feel an intense warmth full of a knowing presence which is everywhere for us and alive. So this person, the subject is mentioning source as a dark, cold light, yet NDEers often refer to the white light as source. So they both can't be correct, right? Unless there's allowed to be multiple realities simultaneously,
Or
So they're
multiple
going
descriptions based on what they, again, their belief systems, their
right,
culture, what they think they're going to come
right,
up against or with. Yeah,
right. So it's
seems like it's
difficult to
always
take
coupled
any of
with
this as an absolute truth. It's just subjective according to the individual that's experiencing it or creating it, maybe. So they go on, they talk about source, and the subject says, the source is endless. As souls, we never die. We know that somehow. As we coalesce, our increasing wisdom makes the source stronger. And is that the reason the source desires to perform this exercise? Yes, to give life to us so we can arrive at a state of perfection. That's one of the things Dolores was saying too, with perfection, or at least one of those books we were talking about in the first part. And Dr. Newton says, why does a source who is ostensibly perfect already need to create further intelligence which is less than perfect? And the subject says, to help the creator create. In this way, by self-transformation and rising to higher plateaus of fulfillment, we add to the building blocks of life. And Dr. Newton asks, were souls forced to break away from the source and come to places like Earth because of some sort of original sin or fall from grace in the spirit world? The subject says, that's nonsense. We came to be magnified in the beautiful variety of creation. Dr. Newton says, I want you to listen to me carefully. If the source needs to be made stronger or more wise by using a division of its divine energy to create less intelligence, which it hopes will magnify, doesn't this suggest it lacks full perfection itself? Thank you, Dr. Newton, for asking that question. He's seeing the same things. And the subject says, the source creates for fulfillment of itself. That sounds, I don't know.
Dr. Because it's not fulfilled.
Kind of selfish, right? Dr. Newton says, that's my point. How can that which is absolute become more absolute unless something is lacking? And the subject says, that which we see to be our source is all we can know, and we think what the Creator desires is to express itself through us by birthing. And Dr. Newton says, and do you think the source is actually made stronger by our existence as souls? Long pause in this answer. I see the Creator's perfection maintained and enriched by sharing the possibility of perfection with us, and this is the ultimate extension of itself. Dr. Newton asks, so the source starts out by deliberately creating imperfect souls and imperfect life forms for these souls and watches what happens in order to extend itself? Yes, and we have to have faith in this decision and trust the process of returning to the origin of life. One has to be starving to appreciate food, to be cold to understand the blessings of warmth, and to be children to see the value of the parent. The transformation gives us purpose. Dr. Newton asks, and do you believe if the source didn't create souls to nurture and grow, its sublime energy would shrink from a lack of expression? And the subject sighs and says, perhaps that's its purpose. And so, even Newton was asking if the source needs to be made stronger or more wise by dividing its divine energy to create lesser intelligence, which I hope's, I don't know, and he's asking, doesn't that suggest lack of full perfection?
Yes.
And the answer, and when he got pressed to the very end, all he said was, "Well, we have to have faith, and we have to trust."
So maybe if we did have, I don't like the memory wipe stuff, but if we had the memories, if we knew, maybe we would say,
Wouldn't
hey, wait a
benefit.
minute, stop using us for your own growth and evolution.
Exactly. It's very
Maybe we would
possible.
say, no, thank you. Prefer not
Yeah.
to suffer so you can evolve.
Yeah.
I know.
So Dr. Newton asks this one soul, when do you first realize that you might be returning to Earth? And the subject says, a soft voice comes into my mind and says, it's about time, don't you think? Dr. Newton asks, who is this voice? My instructor. Some of us have been given a push when they think we are ready again. And
There's
do you
that
think you'll be,
push.
yeah, there's that push. And do you think you will still be going to Earth when you near the end of your incarnations? Maybe no. There is another world besides Earth, but with Earth people. What does this mean? Earth will have fewer people, less crowded. It's not clear to me. He's talking about
Oh,
colonization someplace else. That's not clear to him. But he says, yes, the instructors don't, or he says, I'd like to stay, but the instructors don't want us hanging around here too long, or we will get into a rut. Could you insist on staying? Well, yes, the instructors don't force you to leave because they are so gentle. He laughs. But they have their ways of encouraging you when the time comes. Do you know of anyone
yeah.
who didn't want to be reborn again on Earth for any reason? Yes, my friend Mark. He said he had nothing to contribute anymore. He was sick of life on Earth and didn't want to go back. What did the teachers do with him? Was he allowed to stay in the spirit world? We choose to be reborn when it is decided we are ready. When it is decided we are ready, they don't force you to do anything. Mark was shown he did benefit others around him. What happened to Mark? This is the subject saying this. After some more indoctrination, Mark realized that he had been wrong about his abilities, and finally he went back to Earth. Dr. Newton says, indoctrination? This makes me think of coercion. And the subject gets disturbed by the remark, and he says, it's not that way at all. Mark was just discouraged and needed the confidence to keep trying. And note, case 10 in chapter 4 on displaced souls told us about how souls who had absorbed too much negative energy from Earth were remodeled. Dr. Newton says, if the guides don't force you, could a soul absolutely refuse to be reborn? Yes, I guess you could stay here and never be reborn if you hated it that much, but the instructors told Mark that without life in a body, his studies would take longer. If you lose having direct experience, you miss a great deal. So here's the peer pressure, and after they could be given a push, and they don't technically force you to, but they have their ways. And like you say, why, if we've got eternity, then what's the big rush? I don't know.
Wow. So suspicious.
Yeah.
So,
So this subject starts talking about this ring of destiny, and when they're
right.
talking about going into a new life, he talks to the coordinators who actually assist us in previewing our life possibilities at the ring. What is the ring? That's where I'm going. We call it the ring of destiny. I'm floating towards the ring. It's circular, a monster bubble. Keep going. What else can you tell me? There is a concentrated energy force. The light is so intense, I'm being sucked inward through a funnel. It's a little darker. The ring is surrounded by banks of screens. I am looking at them. Screens on walls? They appear as walls themselves, but nothing is really solid. It's all elastic. The screens curve around me, moving. Tell me more about the screens. They are blank, not reflecting anything, yet they shimmer as sheets of glass, mirrors. What happens next? It's as if someone flipped a switch on the projector in a panorama movie theater. The screens come alive with images, and there is color, action, full of light and sound. And he said, would you say this device resembles a computer? Sort of. It works on a tracking system which converts. Converts what? My commands are registered on the panel so I can track the action. And Dr. Newton says, if one's future destiny is not fully preordained, as you say, why call this space the ring of destiny? Oh, there is destiny, all right. The life cycles are in place. It's just that there are so many alternatives which are unclear. So here they're talking about technology with screens and something sort of like a computer. And it's destiny, a ring of destiny. It's very interesting. What are they doing with technology on the other side? And just as an aside, in the beginning, when they're talking about being like homed in on a wave of like a beam, and they were talking almost like it's a radio. Well, all this radio technology, it's like transducers and receivers, and all that stuff is crystal. And then the near-death experiences, you hear about these crystal cities, and here's all this
Right.
crystal over there. Are they using this crystal technology as a way to pull us in? I don't even know. But it makes
Hmm.
me wonder why they need technology over there as spirits that can manifest anything instantaneously with thought or intention. I don't know. So, accepting what befalls us on the road of life as acts of God does not mean our existence. This is, I think, Michael Newton talking. Does not mean our existence should be locked into spiritual determinism, where we must submit to an unalterable fate. If everything was preordained, there would be no purpose or justice to our struggle. The purpose of reincarnation is the exercise of free will. Thus, karmic destiny means we are not just caught up in events over which we have no control. We have karmic lessons and responsibility. But whatever happens to us in life, it is important we understand that our happiness or pain does not reflect either blessings or betrayal on the part of a God oversoul, our guides, our life selection coordinators. We are masters of our destiny. And that's what this channel is about. We want to say that we are the masters of our destiny. We do have sovereign spirits. With sovereign spirits, we can, use our intention to manifest our whatever reality we want to experience and stop being led around by these external authorities who guilt trip us and use peer pressure tactics, all that kind of stuff. And they talk about choosing a new body. They say one of the last requirements before embarkation for many souls is to go before the council of elders for the second time. While some of my subjects see the council only once between lives, most see them right after death and just before rebirth. My guide Marge escorts me to a soft white space, which is like being in a cloud-filled enclosure. I see my committee of 3 waiting for me as usual. The middle elder seems to have the most commanding energy. The committee wants me to honor my contract. They stress the benefits of persistence and holding to my values under adversity. I often give in too easily to anger, and they remind me of this while reviewing my past actions and reactions towards events and people. So, as you're saying, we come down here on Earth for 80 years or whatever on average, and we're being prodded and probed and put in all kinds of test situations where people are being mean to us, and we're having to get, and there's going to be a time in your life where you're going to get angry with somebody. You're going to be short, you're going to be terse, and so they can always show that and go, well, you got to work on your anger issues. And when does it end? It does not make sense to me.
Yeah, it seems like they have so many different ways to manipulate and control. I mean, the guides, it sounds like they're right there at your desk. As soon as you cross over, the guides are there, and they manifest as someone that you feel comfortable with, either an angel or a relative, loved one, and want you to go with them right away. And I don't know, I just feel so nervous about that, cautious about that, because of some of these situations that it did not turn out so well. They were, as we're learning from the NDEs and the in-between lives, they don't want to come back,
Yeah,
but
and
they're
and this
convinced
is
eventually, even if it takes a while, they'll show up. Okay, I think it's about
yeah.
time now. What?
It's like good cop, bad cop. And at one point they're saying, well, you got so much you got to do better, and you made all these mistakes. But then at the other hand, they're going, well, but you can do it. We know you can. They're giving us encouragement because they want us to keep coming back. And committee wants me to honor my contract. And it says here, elders Magra give me inspiration, hope, and encouragement to trust myself more in bad situations and not let things get out of hand. And then, as a final act to bolster my confidence when I'm about to leave, they raise their arms and send a power bolt of positive energy into my mind to take with me. The elders are bathed in bright light, and the whole setting has an aura of divinity. The subject put it this way: when we are taken into the presence of these superior beings who exist in such a high spiritual realm, it validates our feelings about the source of creation. It's also interesting in some of this other point in the book, he says, these guides have other entities who assist them. From what I can see, every soul group usually has one or more rather new teachers in training. And then it says, these entities to whom even the masters report are in the darkest purple range of energy. These superior beings must be getting close to the creator. I am told these shadowy figures are elusive, but highly venerated beings in the spirit world.
Hmm.
shadowy figures.
Mhm.
Here's Dr. Newton asks this one. He says, "Well, who creates the basic elements of your experiments, the primary substance of physical matter?" And the answer is the maker. And they were talking about, do you personally create suns in our universe? A full-scale sun? Oh no, that's way over my head and requires the powers of many. I generate only on a small scale. What can you generate? Small bundles of highly concentrated matter, heated. But what does your work look like when you're finished? Small solar systems. So over there, they can like actually practice trying to make worlds, like just like we're
Wow.
saying, you can
Okay.
manifest your own world, your own reality to live in, and they're over there doing these things apparently. If the source represents all the spirit world, this is Dr. Newton, how does this mental place differ from physical universes with stars, planets, and living things? The answer, universes are created to live and die for the use of the source. The place of spirits is the source. And they're talking about how it's for the fulfillment of the source, right? And you have to have faith in that decision. um,
Just have
yeah.
faith. Don't think about it too much.
Yeah, so they're talking about the
All for
controllers
your
come
own
into my
good.
mind. He says I can hide nothing from them, but sometimes I get lost when their thoughts are transmitted back and forth in the rapid communication between them. So these superior beings are just, they get these thoughts going back so fast that the soul, everything's supposed to be transparent over there, right? And there's no secrecy or nothing hidden, but their thoughts are going back so fast that the soul apparently cannot keep up with them and doesn't know what's going on. Isn't that a problem? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so at the end of the book, I mean, Newton shares his conclusions. He says, when I ask my subjects how a loving God could permit suffering, surprisingly, there are few variations in their responses. My cases report our souls were born of a creator which places a totally peaceful state deliberately out of reach. So we will strive harder. We learn from wrongdoing. The absence of good traits exposes the ultimate flaws in our nature. Well, if we do have ultimate flaws in our nature, well, who isn't it the fault of the creator that created that to begin with? I don't know.
Absolutely.
And it says that which is not good is testing us. Otherwise, we would have no motivation to better the world through ourselves and no way to measure advancement. When I ask my subjects about the alternating merciful and wrathful qualities we perceive to be the self-expression of a teacher oversoul, some of them say the creator only shows certain attributes to us for specific ends. Um, says, I have come to believe that we live in an imperfect world by design. We might exist as one single dimensional universe out of many, each having its own creator governing at a different level of proficiency in levels similar to the progression of souls seen in this book. Under this pantheon, the divine being of our particular house would be allowed to govern in his or her own way. So he's kind of talking about the concept of a demiurge right there.
Hmm. Hmm.
He says, I am told large numbers of souls who have had more frequent incarnations in recent centuries of on Earth are opting, when they get the chance, for less stressful worlds. There are enlightened places where amnesia is greatly reduced without causing homesickness for the spirit world. As we approach the next millennium, the masters who direct Earth's destiny appear to be making changes to permit more information and understanding of who we are and why we are here to come into our lives. He says, a number of my more advanced subjects have stated there is a growing movement in the spirit world to change the game rules on Earth. These people say their souls had less amnesia about self and the inner life when they lived in earlier cultures. It seems in the last few thousand years there's been tighter blocking on a conscious level of our immortal memories. This has been a contributing factor in the loss of faith in our capacity for self-transcendence. So that is the Journey of Soul, the book Journey of Souls, Case Studies of Life Between Lives by Dr. Michael Newton. He's got another book called Destiny of Souls. I don't know how we're doing on time. It's shorter
Well,
than the Journey of Souls material, but
yeah, we're over an hour.
okay. Do you want to save it for another part where we talk
Uh,
about that and others, or
can we
did we
include that in
finish?
the next section that we're doing with the other?
How much time? Well, if I mean, this material is not as long as the Journey of Souls. It probably get through it in 10, 15 minutes, I would imagine. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll see what we can do. So,
Okay.
Destiny of Souls, he says, homecoming can take place in two types of settings. A few souls might briefly meet a returning soul at the gateway and then leave in favor of a guide who takes them through some preliminary orientation. More commonly, the welcoming committee waits until the soul actually returns to their spirit group. This group may be isolated in a classroom, gathered around the steps of a temple, sitting in a garden, or the returning soul could encounter many groups in a study hall atmosphere. In my lectures, I often remark about a client who took 4,000 years of past lives finally to conquer jealousy. I can report he's not a jealous person today, yet he has made little progress with fighting his own intolerance. He says, the council is not a tribunal of judges, nor a courtroom where souls appear to be tried and sentenced for wrongdoing. Although I must admit that once in a while, someone will tell me they feel going in front of the council is like being sent to the principal's office in school. Members of the council want to talk to us about our mistakes and what we can do to correct negative behavior in the next life. So once again, they're making the comparison. Oh no, it's not a judgment, but yet it kind of feels that way, and they are kind of telling you need to go back because of that. So that's sort of a judgment. Okay, so soul birthing and nurseries. My soul was created out of a great irregular cloudy mass. I was expelled as a tiny particle of energy from this intense pulsating bluish yellow and white light. The pulsations send out hailstorms of soul matter. He says, I remember being in a nursery of some sort where we were like unhatched eggs in a beehive. There's in this embryonic fluid waiting to be fertilized, and I sensed there were many other cells of young lights who were coming awake with me. I mean, this sounds like something right out of the Matrix almost. Dr. Newton says, what has been your most significant experience between your lives? I go to the place of hatching, where souls are hatched. I'm an incubator mother, a kind of midwife. Are you telling me you work in a soul nursery? Yes, we help the new ones emerge. We facilitate early maturation by being warm, gentle, and caring. We welcome them. Please explain the surroundings of the place to me. It's gas-like, a honeycomb of cells with swirling currents of energy above. There's intense light. When you say honeycomb, I wonder if you mean that the nursery has a beehive structure or what. Yes, although the nursery itself is a vast emporium without seeming to be limited by outside dimensions, the new souls have their own incubator cells where they stay until their growth is sufficient to be moved away from the emporium. They're talking about these new souls being incubated. I mean, this almost does sound like hatching of eggs and farming. I mean, they're creating these new souls, and what for? To what end? You really do have to.
Right, and I don't know if the ultimate source that doesn't God need the ultimate source, or what God, if you call it God, needs these little these little departments where you're creating, and the computer room and the technology, and I don't know, it just sounds really.
Maybe he likes a good game of Sims or something. I don't know. Because, so Dr. Newton says, from what you're saying, I get a picture of a long pearl necklace. The soles of the pearls connected in a line. Is this at all accurate? Yes, rather like a string of pearls on a silvery conveyor belt. It reminds me of the movie Soul, where the souls were just like on this conveyor belt and going into the light. And zzz,
Oh my gosh.
He says, she says, what we pass on with our vibrations during the drying of new energy is the essence of the beginning, a hopefulness of future accomplishment. The mothers call it the love hug. This involves instilling thoughts of what they are and what they can become. When we enfold a new soul in a love hug, it infuses this being with our understanding and compassion. Dr. Newton says, let me carry this vibrational hugging one step further. Does each new soul have an individual character at this point? Do you add or subtract from its given identity? No, this is in place upon arrival, although the new soul does not yet know who they are. We bring nurturing. We are announcing to the hatchling it's time to begin. By sparking its energy, we bring to the soul an awareness of its existence. This is the time of the awakening. And then there's this librarian with life books. He's carrying a set of scrolls, roll-up charts. He's muttering and shaking his head at me. Do you have any idea why? He's the librarian. He sets his scroll in front of me and opens it. Then he points to a series of lines representing my life. They're lifelines, my lines. And then there's this council of elders. Long after souls return to their spirit groups, they are called before a gathering of wise beings. A step or two above our guides, these ascended masters are the most advanced identifiable entities my still incarnating clients see in the spirit world. They give them different names, such as the old ones, the sacred masters, the venerables, the pragmatic titles like examiners of the committee. Our guides notify us. He goes, one man in Toronto couldn't contain himself and loudly proclaimed to everyone in the audience, aha, I knew it, a courtroom, judges, punishment. This is Newton's lecturing, right? Our guides notify us when it's time to go before the council, and usually they will escort us to the chambers of these ascended masters. So once again, it's more of this council and all that kind of stuff. There's these emblems of like a cluster of grapes that represents not a single fruit, but multiples of the same fruit to absorb different aspects of the same whole. That sounds wonderful. And then these rebellious souls, he says, I've had a few clients who left the council chamber a little unsettled. These are souls who feel they could have presented themselves a little better to a particular elder. There are other uncommon cases, especially with young rebellious souls, where I've had the impression they are fighting what they call an act of contrition by standing in front of the elders. The following quote is an example. I get a little upset with the all-knowing ones. They lull you into complacency because they want you to spill your guts out to them. Sure, I made a lot of mistakes, but it's their fault in sending me to Earth in a body that got me into trouble. When I complain about Earth, they don't level with me completely. They are stingy with information. I tell them that life makes you take risks, and my director talks to me about moderation. I said to him, that's all very well for you to say, sitting here safe and comfortable while I'm fighting to survive down in a war zone. These immature souls do not realize that to be on a council, an elder survived many war zones. So, I mean, here's Michael Newton writing this book. He gets some of these people under their hypnosis and they're complaining like, oh, during this life, Michael Newton could have just been like, well, that's not very positive to what we're trying to understand about soul growth. And he could have just left that out of the book. I'm very happy that he included that. Maybe there was even more that were even more rebellious and more that he just like, okay, that's just a little too, there's this process of what they decide what goes into books. And I'm just grateful that he even allows some of this pushback to be in the book at all.
Right.
And then there's this graduation. There comes that time in a soul's existence when it's ready to move away from its primary soul group. My next case comes from a soul who recently attained level 3 after 1,000 years of incarnation. And he's talking about what will your first assignment be now that you've graduated. He said, I will be nurturing the youngest souls as if we will be raising flowers from the seedlings. You feed them with tenderness and understanding. And where do you think these newer souls come from? From the divine egg, the womb of creation, spun out like a silken thread, and then taken to the nursery mothers, and then to us. It's very exciting. The responsibility will be so challenging. So even when you graduate, they're like right back in the system, and now you're like the guardians, you're like the teachers, you're promoting the system from within. It's interesting. And then there's this ring of destiny, or the screening room of future lives. I think we talked about the ring earlier. It's a circular dome theater with the screens, and there's these control panels or level bars that they can use to then there's these time masters who are coordinators, engaged with past, present, and future timelines. And so he ends the book with a quote. Newton says, I have a final quote that came from a subject who was preparing for another departure from the spirit world into a new incarnation on Earth. I think a statement offers a fitting conclusion of this book. Newton writes, or the statement was, coming to Earth is about traveling away from our house to a foreign land. Some things seem familiar, but most are strange until we get used to them, especially conditions which are unforgiving. Our real home is a place of absolute peace, total acceptance, and complete love. As souls separated from our home, we can no longer assume these beautiful features will be present around us. On Earth, we must learn to cope with intolerance, anger, and sadness while searching for joy and love. We must not lose our integrity along the way, sacrificing goodness for survival and acquiring attitudes either superior or inferior to those around us. We know that living in an imperfect world will help us to appreciate the true meaning of perfection. We ask for courage and humility before our journey into another life. As we grow in awareness, so will the quality of our existence. This is how we are tested. Passing this test is our destiny. End quote.
Searching for love and joy when we just left a place of love and joy.
Right.
And
well, it goes back to that moment of like maybe just realizing what you got and appreciating it, perhaps. I don't know.
I don't know. And those huggers, and they create who you are. Well, then they're creating imperfect creatures then, I guess. So, but we're the ones at fault for having imperfections when they're the ones creating imperfect creatures.
Yeah, I don't know that you have to like appreciate everything is good. Do you even stop to wonder like everything's good and everything? You don't even question it, right? You do appreciate it. I mean, how can you not appreciate it? It's good. And I don't understand why you would have to create all this madness and suffering and stuff just to come back and go, oh, well, thank God I'm not in a place like that anymore.
But I'll go back 1,000 times before I really get
right.
before I'm grateful.
Yeah, I don't know. But so
gosh.
that is Michael Newton's books. Those are Dolores Cannon. That's Dolores Cannon's book. We've got one other book and some other, like I want to touch on like briefly the Sumerian text and the Gnostic text and the Tibetan Book of the Dead, but maybe another time. I don't know how much time we have in this one. It's not too much information, but it does take a little bit of time. I don't know.
Well,
it won't be much of a time for another show. It won't take up that much time really, actually. I don't know.
Well, we've gone through a lot of material.
Yes, we
Thus
have. People's
far.
heads might be swimming at this point.
You've crammed in quite a bit into this one,
Yes,
and
we have.
we focused on, Newton's books primarily. So maybe we
Mm-hmm.
should plan an episode that includes those, and
Okay.
I wanted to talk about something else too. I can't remember right now. Not just what you mentioned, but there was something
Mm-hmm.
else.
Sure.
Right.
Sounds good. Let people catch their breath a little bit from what they just
You need
heard.
to come up for air too. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot.
All right.
Well, that
Yes. I
sounds
think,
like a good plan. We can
okay.
finish up
We're
on another time, and
give you all time to process, digest, go over this material, maybe get the books even and read through them yourselves as well.
they're great books, all of them. To be honest.
All right, so we will sign off. It seems like a good place to sign off. Thank you so much to everyone for watching. This has been Julie McVeigh and Wayne Bush with Sovereign Spirits. And looking forward to next time. If you enjoyed this, of course, give it a thumbs up. And if you are interested in this type of content, subscribe to the channel, partner with us to help get this out in the YouTube world algorithms so other people see it. And then hit the bell icon so you're alerted to the next video. Right now, we're trying to put out one a week, but we'll see how that goes, how our schedule goes.
Yes, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode. And we
Yeah.
really do appreciate your time and consideration.
Hope you're all having a great day. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.